Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liam Mullins from the Seven Stars, and on behalf of Media for All, I'd like to welcome you all to this week's MIFA Matters. Now, Media for All was founded back in 2018 by Naren Patel, and it's made up of BAME role models in the advertising industry. Our focus is and always has been about how we can recruit, retain, and help individuals from BAME communities to really rise within their organisations and the wider industry. Now, we started this webinar as one of the ways that we can try and help, because we believe that part of our role is bringing about conversation, discussion, and bringing that to the table. It's about giving people a forum for people to ask difficult, awkward questions. We don't always know the right thing to say, how to say it, what to ask. This really is meant to be a real safe space to ensure that everyone has the language and vocabulary to be able to have the right conversations. Now, a lot of our sessions have seen questions coming in regarding, why are people's lived experience in the advertising industry so different from some of their other colleagues? So today's topic is about focusing on what we can do to make our organisations and the advertising industry as a whole a more enticing place for people of colour. Now, we know that helping create a more diverse industry, we need to encourage people from BAME communities to see advertising as a really desirable place to work. And unfortunately, that isn't always seen as the case. And that's a real problem, because until we get that to change, we're never going to create a more diverse industry. So we need to do that by both providing opportunities from the junior, grad, school leavers, apprenticeship, that level. But hopefully we'll get into a bit of a debate today where we talk about the fact that when people from BAME communities get into our industry, if they don't see people at the top table, if they don't see people in leadership positions, are they going to stick around? Do they feel that they can grow in the industry? So again, we'll get into that a little bit too. So before I introduce the team, I just wanted to reiterate one thing this week. It's something we're going to say every week. It's a really honest conversation we have, and it's a bit of a no holds back situation, but it is absolutely a safe space. But if you are triggered or need any emotional support from following our panel today, NABs have an advice line that's open to anyone in the industry. Their phone numbers, they've got an email, all that support is on their website. So again, if you need any support after anything you hear today, please feel free to reach out to there. Right, let me introduce our panel today. And first up, we have Shanice Mears. She's the co-founder and head of talent at the Elephant Room. Shani's also a Race Disparity Advisory Board member for Number 10, and as well as the creator of Girls Let's Talk. Now, Girls Let's Talk is a platform for like-minded women sharing experience and personal development, building both online and in real life events. So that's brilliant, Shani. We're so pleased you could join us today. Really excited to have you. Thanks for joining. Secondly, we have Jenny Biggam. Jenny's the founder of the Seven Stars and is also a trustee of the Seven Stars Foundation. Now, I've worked with Jen for nearly 15 years. I could definitely speak firsthand to the work that she's done to ensure the agency is an inclusive place where talent from any background can really thrive. Give us a wave, Jen. We also have the brilliant Lisa Targett, and Lisa's the general manager of Tribe, who are an influencer marketplace that connects brands directly with their most influential customers to craft branded content upfront and from scratch. Those of you join us every week, and I know a lot of you do now. We have the brilliant Joey, and Joey heads up all of the events over at Global Radio. Thanks for joining us today, Joey. And then last but not least, we have the ever stylish brand and commercial consultant, Darren, who has been in media for over 20 years, including stints at News UK, Hearst and Shortlist. And you know you'll always be more stylish than me, Darren. So if we have any questions as we're going through, as I've put in the sidebar, please put them in the Q&A. We had some people put them in the chat. That's cool, but it would help me out if you could stick it in the Q&A this week, just so that I can point them at the right people as we're going through. And if we don't get to your questions as we're going through this discussion, we'll definitely come back to them, and we've allowed for some time on that at the end. But enough from me. I'm going to start with Shani. And Shani, I've got a question for you to start us off, which was, you responded to the Adland commits open letter with a clear thanks but no thanks. So it would be great to hear a bit from you about, why was that your response, and what is it you think we should be doing as an industry to do things differently to attract BAME talent at all levels?
Hey, thank you for having me, firstly. I suppose, you know what, I get asked this question a lot since that letter's come out, and it really varies as to why I wrote that, but initially it was more so about the fact that obviously we've gone through such an interesting time in 2020, and the tragedy that was George Floyd, obviously when he got killed, I kind of felt like it was a bit, I don't know, for me, I was just unimpressed that it took such a tragedy for the industry to recognise that you know, there's not enough Black talent and people who identify as non-white coming through the industry, and there's not enough leadership at that point. Do you know what I mean? I feel like the fact that it's taken a man to die for you to now pledge that you're going to promise to do better, I just feel like it just wasn't good enough for me personally. And I feel like D&I is such a big conversation in the industry, yet we're still here where we're having to pledge because, yet again, Black talent and Asian talent and mix all those people again who identify as non-white is not coming through. It's just a bizarre concept to me. Like, you would never pledge to give white people talent, to white people jobs. You would never do that. So why do we need to pledge to give a Black person a job or a mixed, do you know what I mean? And it simply is just because of the color of their skin. And I feel like I understand that the intention behind the pledge was good intention, and I'm not against that at all, because I do think that there are organisations out there trying to do better and working towards becoming better. And the problem that we have is not an overnight fix. So I do also understand that there are people working towards, like, you know, better days. But also as well, for me, it's like, call it what it is. Like, there's a lack of Black talent, there's a lack of Black leadership, there's a lack of Asian talent. But then at the same time, what we were going through at that time was a Black Lives Matter movement. It was a revolution, a period where Black people were going through an immense amount of suffering. And like, what are we trying to address right now? Are we addressing the lack of Black talent? Are we addressing the lack of BAME talent? Like, there's so many nuances to what that is. And I feel like sometimes people don't want to sort of just talk straight, do you know what I mean, and say what it is, because at the end of the day, there are different needs for different types of communities, do you know what I mean? And I feel like I addressed it in the letter, like, you can't just put us as one homogenous group and say, all right, this is what you like need, because it's not the same. And I suppose for me, that was the sort of my frustration and my expression when I was just like, you know, thank you, but no thank you, because I just think like it starts off so small. There's so much small things that can be done that are not being done. Probably doesn't even have any cost, you know what I mean? Like, but it's still not getting done. So that pledge for me personally just wasn't good enough.
Thanks, Shani. And I think, you know, again, people have joined us for a few weeks now. You've heard of us talk about, you know, there's like this authentic intent. And I guess if people are coming from from the right place, that should be acknowledged, and maybe celebrated is an overclaim, but, you know, trying to make a moment in time be that change. But I totally agree with what you're saying. It's like, we can't wait for someone to die in the USA before we start looking at what we need to do and what we need to change. So I hear your frustration too, and it's like, this is not a new situation. This has been going on for years and years and years. And, you know, here at MIFA, we look around and we go, look, we just want more different people. We want people who look different around our industry. We don't want to be surrounded by people who all look the bloody same, right? So we totally hear that frustration. And Shani, just staying with you for one more minute, is what's the biggest thing that we, you know, I get your point, you know, should it have taken that? But now we've got some momentum, and now we are finally feeling like we're moving forward. What would you say is one thing that can sort of accelerate that?
I don't know if it's like one thing,
Yeah.
but what I can say is like moving outside of your community and social circles and social groups is very important. But what people need to understand is that I hear a lot of companies say, oh, you know, they don't apply for the jobs, or, oh, you know, where do we find this talent? Where do they exist? And it's like, well, that is an accountability that is also on you. You need to move outside of the spaces that you're going to look for talent, and make your space or whatever it is you're offering accessible. And accessibility is one of the biggest things I always talk about. And I built a network, like, just off the back of, you know, understanding, like, to over 1,000 people, where you literally there's just accessibility for everyone to get events, jobs and opportunity. And that's literally just a Google email forum. And it's like, that cost nothing. That cost me nothing to do. And now people get jobs. Like, literally, I've had people from Amsterdam call me, like, companies like, oh my gosh, how do we get access to this network? And it's like, that's all you have to do, is just think outside the box. Like, it's just not enough. So I feel like when you're looking at support and when you're looking at what does it look like for talent coming into the business? What does your accessibility look like for them? Like, you know, when they're going through an interview process, you know, sometimes you do have to adapt that. Like, it's not one shoe fits all. There are a lot of people coming through the industry that they don't know the whole code switching thing. They can't adapt to certain spaces, and you need to help that. Like, and I just think organizations and companies just should be more understanding to that. Like, a lot of people, they want to talk about, oh, how do we get them through the door? But you won't retain that talent if you can't adapt to allowing them to feel like they can be themselves and be their real selves in that space. I think I would just urge companies to really think about that and look what that support looks like in many different ways, because it's a lot of, if you want a lot of different people coming through your doors, you are going to have to adapt in different ways to adapt to those people and their needs.
Brilliant, thank you, Shani. And I think that's it's almost like we practice this. That's a good kind of handover point for me to ask you, Jen, in terms of the 7 stars. And I know for a few years we've been moving in the right direction, but I certainly feel there's been a definite kind of, not turbocharged, but an increased velocity in terms of where we're trying to get to. What are some of the things that you and the equality team and the 7 stars are doing to really drive that forward?
Yeah,
Hello.
sure. I mean, I just to pick up on some of the points, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Finding non-white talent is just not a difficult thing to do, and anybody that says that, you know, feel free to get in touch with me or Liam afterwards if you want to, because we've got numerous things that we've either set up ourselves in terms of just doing outreach to people. We've even gone, you know, as far as going, you know, before unis and all that outreach, but we've gone into schools, you know, we've mentored black talent, black school kids, all that kind of stuff. It's just a really easy thing to do, but the real difficulty is you know, adapting and making your environment welcoming once people start, and what you need to stop doing and start doing differently. And you know, I would absolutely say George Floyd for us has been a turning point. So we've always had lots of great initiatives around supporting Black and BAME team members. That can be anything from, you know, hosting careers evenings just for non-white talent, through to what we do around Black History Month, all of those kind of things. But George Floyd has made us all at 7 Stars kind of stop and think, you know, is it enough? How do we really turn this around, and how do we become actively anti-racist in everything that we do? So, you know, we did sign the open letter, and I've read Shani's article in Campaign about this isn't enough, and I completely agree. It was one of a number of initiatives that we have taken over the last few months. And it only works as one of those initiatives. It certainly is probably one of the least important initiatives, because it's the least tangible in terms of how you make it a different environment as a place to work. You know, I could list everything we've done. We're for the first time, we're actively writing an anti-racist charter. You know, we instead of doing a client update about media industry, which we normally do every single week, we changed it all into, you know, the whole focus being anti-racist, and the whole debate, and giving our clients lots of additional kind of sources to go and research the whole topic, which got brilliant feedback from our clients as well. But I think the single most important thing that we've done is we've created these forums for our Black talent to talk to the whole of the agency, and somehow actually in a kind of virtual world, you know, a lot of Black talent's been really keen to take part in this, and felt, you know, that they've wanted to do this. And for me, that's the thing. It's like hearing those first-hand experiences, hearing what some of our people have to put up with on the tube or in a pub or when they go on holiday and all that kind of stuff has been an absolute eye-opener. And, you know, as a white person, that allows you really to change the conversation, because I don't know a single person that wasn't, you know, appalled and upset about the George Floyd murder. But what I do hear among other people is, you know, oh, but I don't think people should take down statues, or I don't think everyone should have been out demonstrating when they didn't have masks on, and things like that. And for me, I can always say, well, I think those statues shouldn't have existed in the first place. The council should have taken them down. It shouldn't have been up to people to take them down. Or yes, I think people should have gone and protest because it was so abhorrent what happened to George Floyd. But actually hearing the first-hand experiences allows you to take that conversation to another whole level. And because suddenly you can start the conversation, yes, but you're saying that you don't know what it's like. And then you start saying, this happened to a friend of mine, this happened to somebody that I work with, I wasn't aware of it until this happened. And suddenly you've got these first-hand experiences that really allows you to change the conversation, and the level of understanding that you can really drive through hearing those first-hand experiences as you know, has completely changed a lot of people's attitudes, I think. So that's the most important thing we've done. But, you know, as Liam said, we have literally kind of got a list of initiatives. And, you know, it is a massive shame that it's taken George Floyd to kind of to fast track that thinking in, you know, not just in our agency, but across, you know, industry really. But I just think if something positive happens as a result of it, if we all change as a result of it, then something good can come from it.
Thanks, Jenny. And I think, Jen, your point about if anyone wants advice or any, you know, some of the tangible things you've done, and then definitely reach out to Jen or I and we can share that. But, you know, as MIFA, we are trying to get a whole host of resources together that can help point people to some of the easy things and some of the harder things that we need to start doing. Joey, hi mate. Tell me a little bit about, you know, either your experience in terms of, you know, how, you know, your entry into the industry, or, you know, what Global are doing maybe in terms of trying to make the people that they bring into their business more reflective of society as a whole, and kind of be a bit more inclusive.
Yeah, so I think, you know, we hit the nail on the head there, where it's got to be representation at all levels. I think you can't just, some people sometimes take one or the other. It's either the entry level or it is the senior level. And I think for business to really be successful, you've got to look at both ends of the scale and attack both ends of the scale. So obviously at Global, we're quite beneficial that we have the Global Academy, where we're able to almost funnel through and nurture new talent into the business through apprenticeship schemes. And we're working with Queen Mary University specifically on tech and bringing new Black talent in through tech. But I think in terms of what the industry can do to almost also change that is to, you know, almost start to spotlight some of your individuals. I think what Shanice said really hit the nail on the head for me, which is you've got to remove your inner circle and kind of remove the mentality and look beyond your circle. I think that's where the unconscious bias element really starts to kick in with a lot of people. So there's a lot of self-reflection, especially if you're a manager or you're a senior manager and you're looking at hiring. What does your recruitment process look like? What does your retention process look like? What does your promotional process really look like? Even down to things as interviews and panelists within interviews. Do you have a diverse panel when you're having to interview, when you're interviewing new people coming into your business? Because really, you know, for people to really excel, they need to see people who look like them within the organization. So I really think that is a big part of what needs to happen. And also even things like what we're doing now with these panels, as an industry collective, if you're putting on an event, please look at your panel makeup. Is your panel makeup reflective of what the industry is also trying to show and what the industry is trying to achieve? Because there will be people who want to enter that industry looking at that panel and saying, well, if I can't see anyone that looks like me, even on a reflective panel, why would I want to even enter into that industry? So I think there's various facets and folds to approaching this, as Shani said. And I think you have to look at the grassroots entry level, and then you also need to look at the higher entry level, the higher, most senior level at the same time. Because I think the stat is something like 4.7% at C level of BAME leadership within the UK, and that definitely needs to change, but we've got to attack it from both ends of the scale. So as a company, if you're looking at your new active ventures in terms of attraction, you've got to look at, okay, how are we recruiting at senior level? And really back to Jen's point, which is what companies are you partnering with? What recruitment agencies are you looking to? And how are you reflective of that? And in the same breath, looking at entry level, are you partnering with people like Creative Access or Brixton Finishing School, or providing opportunities for people to come into the industry and say, this is somewhere I want to be, and I can actually see people above me who look like me. Can you mentor me so I can get to where you are? And I think that is part of the process that needs to take steps into moving forward.
Thanks, Joey. Joey, I love the way you always come with the stats. Love it. We need to lean on you for more of those. And I like the fact you're bringing up the panel makeup as well, because you know that's my pet hate. But yeah, that is a very, very easy thing for people to get right, and unfortunately quite often get wrong. Yeah. Lisa, coming to you, and like you say, you like work in a really interesting business that's kind of co-creating, but also is a small unit of people. What are you doing, or what do you think you should be doing in this space to really drive more inclusive and more representative businesses?
Yeah, I think, we're really fortunate because we're a lot of small teams all over the world, which actually gives a lot more autonomy to those groups in terms of which market they represent, whether it's our New York office, our Philippines office, our London office. We have, I guess it feels a lot more of a flat structure, and the weight of what our staff feel and want to do really bubbles directly up into policy making at our company and culture making. But I do think that's a really good lesson for any kind of organization, because I feel a lot of individuals sit and wait for directives from executive teams or those who create policy businesses, and don't necessarily feel that they align with the company's values if they're not kind of written down and explicit. But a lot of the time, if you look around and culture is that lived experience. And if you are working with your peers and like you're saying at 7 Stars, we're doing the same, creating all types of forums for discussion. Oftentimes that then becomes a culture. All you need to do is somehow distill it and bring it back up the chain, as well as waiting for decisions to be made top down. And I think they do have to work together a lot of the time. And it's the exact same argument as talent entering into businesses or entering this industry. Yes, I don't think there's a pipeline problem at all. I agree with you guys there, but you do understand in a company that has, say, a huge number of, or is very top heavy, they may struggle more than a company like ours, which has sort of one leadership role per region, who then of course may be a little bit out of whack, but can do so many other things to make sure that that's not going to be an existing problem forever. For us, we were answering gender issues, a couple of years ago, and the issues around race and ethnicity equality is a massive one. And then there are so many other elements of diversity and inclusion as well. And I think MEF is doing a good job of talking about that inclusivity. But the Black Lives Matter movement is separate. And I think a lot of people are, struggling to tackle both issues at once, but giving Black Lives Matter the exact platform it requires right now, and the momentum it requires. And so I have to agree with Joey, I have to agree with Jenny as well, which is, you can't be what you can't see. And that has to apply to just every entry point that a person can experience your company. And if that's live events and panels, yep. If that's blog posts on your website that have images in them, there's got to be representation there. If it's literally calling out in job descriptions what kind of stance you have about your culture and the types of people that will add to your culture that you're looking for, it can be there as well. I think there's sort of so many places that you can create, call it out and then create a welcoming environment for young Black talent specifically. And for us being small, we've just opened our arms as far as wide as we can to young talent to come in and, for as long as they want, work with us through mentorships, through internships, for as little or as long time, just so we are making sure that the creator community that we serve, which is, we're 6 people and our creator community is something like 65,000 people in the UK, that we're representing that group, because actually that's where we can do most of the positive impact outside of our organisation as well.
Thanks, Lisa. I think it's really interesting what you guys are saying about, how do people find their way into our industry, right? So if you ask 9 out of 10 people, why did they work in media specifically? No one can really answer that with any authenticity. That they might try and pretend they knew why, but you fall into it, right? And if you fall into it, it's because maybe you know someone. If you know someone, they're most likely to look like, you know, like not like us. So you can kind of understand at the very start of the story why we're not getting the roles are there, the people are there, but why those two things aren't connected. And I think it'd be good to chat about that a bit. And Darren, I think coming specifically to you around that area, you know, 20 years, 40 years, was it in media, Darren? I forget the number. So, you know, you've been around forever. And what have you seen change? How have you seen us try and, you know, have you seen, you know, successfully us get people that are non-white, from non-white communities into the industry? And what is the stumbling block? What is the hurdle there?
Have I seen it? I guess the honest answer is no, I haven't. You know, I think for me, being new to MIFA and being new to the kind of the mentors, it's opened my eyes up to the volume and sheer talent of people of color in this industry. And I think that hasn't been showcased enough in my time that I've been in media. You know, my biggest thought, I think, and suggestion really around what needs to change is the representation of progression. You know, I've never, in 20 years, I've never had a person of color above me in hierarchical change. You know, I've never had a brown or a black boss. I've had no one really to look up to from a mentoring perspective, you know, from a coaching perspective. Notwithstanding, I've had some great coaches and mentors, you know, and they've helped me along and they've helped me progress. But if you're looking about to where I see progression and how I see that change, Karen Blackett has been, you know, the shining light for far too long, really. You know, there hasn't really been anyone following up behind that, even though there are terrifically talented people all over the industry. So I think that representation of progression is absolutely crucial, and the spotlighting of talent, and not just the spotlighting of talent because of the color of their skin, but the value that they add to the business. And I think that's absolutely crucial, that this isn't just a box ticking exercise to say, hey, we've got some great diversity, but these are people that are driving the business forward and are crucial to the success of our business. You see hires and posts at Condé and Vogue with Edward Enninful, but then alongside that kind of progression and representation of progression, there needs to be a change in the culture. You know, so Edward Enninful turns up at Condé Nast Towers and he's asked to use the delivery entrance because the security guard, you know, assumes he's not an employee and that he's there to deliver a package. You know, that's quite frightening. You know, the guy's got an OBE. You know, he's one of the most celebrated and talented editors in his own right, and yet that's still happening, that level of microaggression within his own building. And that's just one small story I'm sure that many of us have experienced or heard about, as kind of Jenny said, those kind of first-hand stories. So I think the representation of progression is absolutely crucial, the spotlighting of talent, but if it isn't backed up with a safe space and a culture where the people feel that they want to stay, you're going to get a high level of churn. And then you're going to spend more money in terms of recruitment. You're going to spend that more money in terms of failed exercises and kind of the refunds and the rebates you're getting out on agents. I think there's an issue at recruitment agency level. Again, you know, that they themselves are indicative of the pipeline that comes through, and I don't think they work specifically hard. You know, before I was consulting, I had my own business 3 years, and I had to work 10 times as hard to find non-white candidates. And coming back to kind of Shani's point, that takes conscious effort and desire to want to have to do that, which means that you have to have that conscious effort and desire within all levels of your organization to want to commit to that. So I think, yes, representation of progression is absolutely key, and the spotlighting of that talent, and then the support of that progression. You know, what are we doing to make sure that middle management can move to senior management? Where are they learning the tricks of the trade? Where are they understanding how to get the cheat codes, if you like? You know, the first time I became a publisher, I didn't know how to do a P&L. No one was ever there to tell me. I had to take keys to the office and go in on a weekend and learn the hard way and speak to my network outside of media to help me with that. So if we can start to create groups like MIFA, like a few of the other initiatives I'm involved with, Black and Brilliant, we can start to support those middle management, to get them into the progression and give them the kind of the coaching and the mentoring that clearly is required in order to help show that representation of progression.
Thank you, Darren. I think, you know, some brilliant things you've mentioned there, and, you know, the fact that if you have to work harder than the person next to you, and if you haven't got that support, and if you haven't got those people that you can lean on, how do you do it? How do you do it all on your own? It must feel incredibly lonely and incredibly difficult. Shani, just coming to you, we've had a question come through around, you know, and I think it ties in a little bit to what Darren was saying there. You know, if you've got, you know, once people come in, if you haven't got the environment for them to thrive, how can you challenge the management? How can you challenge your boss, your leader, to do something different, to make the change that's needed? Is that asking too much for a young person who's already looking different in the industry?
No, not at all. I think it really varies, and everyone's organization is different. So I'm not going to say that, oh yeah, your management and or your senior leadership are going to listen to you straight away. But at the same time, I don't think that you should be fearful of the fact that wanting to make a difference is going to cause a little bit of, I don't know, rub people up the wrong way. Because for me personally, I was in an organization before I co-founded the Elephant Room, a big global advertising agency, and I just used to send down an email to everyone, like a mailing list once a week. It was like the urban lowdown, and it was everything that was happening in Black culture, from news, good news to bad news, literally. And the people in the agency I was just an intern as well, so people who didn't know me would message me, and a lot of that was the senior leadership, to the point where the CEO became my mentor, and then we left, and then we created the Elephant Room. So that was my story. But and I'm not saying that, oh, that's going to happen to everyone, but there are ways in which you can implement small ways of just making sure people have access to information. So we done I got asked to do a small breakfast show, bringing in illustrators, young entrepreneurs that I knew, just to showcase what they were doing, just to introduce the agency to different things. So if you have an idea, just run with it. And you know what? I would also say, to be honest, there are a lot of people, especially young people right now, with portfolio careers. They've got their 9 to 5, and then they've got their 5 to 9, whatever they're doing outside of that. And sometimes the two go hand in hand, and bring whatever you're doing into work and show people, get them interested. So if you are organizing a panel event, if you are looking at, I don't know, different collectives and stuff like that, introduce it into what you're doing. Don't be afraid to go to an event and do a write-up on the event. Be honest about it and send it out. Just think that little bit more outside the box. And although, again, things like this do take time, because not everyone is on the ball straight away. It takes a little bit of, sort of talking and making people understand what is actually happening for people to get on board. And there won't be some people on board, and there will be some people on board. And the reality is that not everyone is going to come on that journey. That's what I've learned. The reality is there are a lot of people happy to be complicit to everything that's happening, and there are a lot of people that want to implement that change, and you just have to sort of roll with it. So if you are a young person, just sort of go and think about what it is that you want to do. And even if you just get that one person, my one person was that CEO, and literally he changed my life. So even if it's just that one person that can be that ally, or understand, help you understand what's happening, and then implement it, but do it anyway. Even if it's outside of work, just do it anyway, and then bring it back into work, because sometimes it does take that bit of time. Some people want to see proof of concept. Yeah, doing that. How do we know what you're doing is right? How do we know that it's working? And go and do it outside with your friends, test run that, and then bring it back in and say, see, this is what I did, I told you. Do you know what I mean? And you'll sort of get people on board that way. And like I said, I think I'm gonna just go back to a point where it's about I think you can't see what you can't be. And I kind of disagree with that, because a lot of Black people have been the first. A lot of Black people we've had to sort of go in and it's oh, I'm the first of this person, or the first person to do that. And I do understand the context of why people say it. If you don't see the representation, then why in the hell would you want to work there? But up until 2020, Black people are still making history. So it's kind of something that we just kind of have to go with at the moment, because at the end of the day, there are still a lot of things we don't have access to. So we are going to have to be the first, and it's going to take a lot, but we still have to push through. And I think a lot of organizations are seeing that now. There's a lot of Black businesses, Black Pound Day, that's just came and shifted the whole mentality for the UK. Do you know what I mean? So I feel there are a lot of things that people are doing for the first time, even though they haven't seen it done before.
Yeah, do you know what? So many things there, and I could honestly listen to you for another half an hour, Shani. And what I would say is that whole thing about equality versus removing barriers versus, what the world needs to do, what the industry needs to do, is take down the fences and take down the walls, right? 100% that needs to happen. We need to get a level playing field, but equally at the same time, I do believe, unfortunately, you do have to work harder. You do have to, or maybe it's not work harder. You have to be prepared to be that first person. You have to be prepared to put yourself outside your comfort zone a little bit. And I think there'll be a lot of people listening that go, well, that's not fair. Why should I have to do a bit more? Why should I have to push a bit more? But the truth is, and you're absolutely right, we've always had to. And hopefully the removing of the barrier and the equaling of the field will mean that you don't have to quite some extent. But still, don't be afraid. Put yourself out there. You know, do the newsletter, do the review, engage people around you. And I think there's such a groundswell of positivity at the moment. Hopefully people get carried up and come with you too. So thank you for sharing that. Jen, in your experience around that specifically, I guess, you know, you probably worked in places where it's not been as easy to, you know, get the leaders to commit to change. But, you know, how do you respond to people who come to you asking for a different way of working or a different, you know, a different platform?
I think sometimes it's really easy to assume that, you know, because there's a thing called a board or a senior leadership team or a chief exec or whatever it might be, that they're the people who've got all the ideas and they're the people that will come up with the solution and then make it happen. And sometimes it's not the case. So sometimes that, you know, I'm a massive believer that the best ideas, you know, come from all over the place. And I think to answer the specific question about somebody saying that they, you know, that their senior leadership signed up to the open letter, but they're hiding behind it and they're not doing anything. I feel like my strongest piece of advice is go and tell them what they should be doing, but give them the solution to it. Give them your ideas, give them your input. Because I think sometimes, you know, there can be you know, and I've worked in lots of places where you kind of sit there and you wait for something to happen. Or you say, why is nothing happening? And maybe you've got the ideas, maybe they genuinely haven't got the ideas, maybe they've got the intent, maybe they've got the you know, all the good intention, and that's why they signed the open letter, but they just don't really know how to do it. And, you know, I'll give you a really good example of something that happened at our place last year when we were doing all of our kind of Black History Month initiatives internally. One of the girls who's, you know, relatively new in our organisation and had joined initially on an internship and then from uni, she came and said to me, look, this is all brilliant, but my Black friends, they haven't heard of media. They don't know that places like this exist as a place to work. And she came up with the idea of doing kind of you know, BAME careers evening. So just doing a bit of outreach and literally, you know, I stood up, I think Liam was involved, and lots and lots of the senior people were involved, and we presented to people and we talked to them about the industry, and we had pizza and we had a really nice time. We met some really nice people. But I wouldn't necessarily have thought of having a BAME careers evening. It was a really easy thing for us to have done. But it came from her. It was her initiative. It was her idea. We gave her all the credit for having had that idea and making something happen. And, you know, it's just something that we've now said, look, we're going to do 2 of these a year. It was a great success, and why not, relatively easy thing to do. But it's just an example of, you know, as a senior leader, it wasn't that I thought we shouldn't do it or had thought about it and rejected it. It was just an idea that she had that, you know, is a really nice thing to be doing. So yeah, my strongest advice to whoever's asked this question really is, you know, go to them with the ideas, go to them with lots of ideas. You know, they're not going to say yes to everything, especially in the current environment when, you know, budgets are tight and things like that. But the more ideas you go to them with, if they keep on saying no, then the reality is you're in the wrong place, and ask them why they keep saying no, and be challenging. But I don't think be challenging that they're doing nothing. I think suggest the ideas, and then if they're doing nothing, then you've got a really, really strong case to challenge.
Thanks, Jenny. We're toying with an idea at MIFA, which is around calling it out, which is if you are in a place and you're continually asking for change or coming up with initiatives and they're not getting, you know, acknowledged or, you know, at least embraced in some way, that, you know, how can MIFA help you to call it out a bit? And I think I said on this call a few weeks ago, I said, look, if you look around and there's no one like you and no one's helping you change things, to Shani's point, you know, no one's helping you change, then get out. And they went, Liam, there's no jobs out there. It's really tough at the moment. It's easy for you to say get out. And in fairness, I think that's where we can maybe help play a bit of a role. I'm going off brief a little bit, me, for people, but I think there's a way we can help and support that. I think we've got 4 more minutes and we've got 2 more questions. So thanks for the brilliant panelists for agreeing to stay on for another 4 or 5 minutes. But Joey, I'm going to come to you, Mr. Numbers Man, and we've had a question in from Gavin, and Gavin's asked, totally understand about having a representative panel for interviews and think it's really important. How can, something that his organisation is struggling with slightly is, how can you appear to genuinely try to attract BAME talent if you don't have a lot of BAME representation at your workplace currently? So I think it lines up with some of the things we've touched on around look up who do you see, and you know, all the discussion we've had about that. But how can we encourage more people in to begin with, I guess?
I think Gavin's point is right, and I think the first thing is they've acknowledged that there's something that they need to fix, and I think that is the brilliant first step. And I think it's also understanding that there's loads of organisations that are in the same place. Like, no organisation is perfect right now. You know, what's happened the last few weeks has sparked a lot of talk and a lot of attention, which is, in some ways, it's a shame that it's had to happen in this way, but we are moving in the right direction. I suppose my response to Gavin would be, in terms of, you know, trying to attract BAME talent, if you don't have that much representation in your work currently, is first of all, just be open and explicit about what you're trying to do, so everyone knows where your starting point actually is. I think your next move from that will then be within your industry. I think we sometimes tend to, some companies can sometimes tend to silo themselves when it comes to fixing problems. But at the same time, we're an industry with loads of other companies that are making movements in different spheres. And at the end of the day, within the industry, people effectively talk and people know people. So a lot of it can come through recommendations from other companies who are probably a little bit more representative in that space. And then the same thing is that if you do need help and acknowledge that you need help, then really start to partner with organizations like Creative Equals or Creative Access, or organizations like that can actually help embed those ethoses into your culture and into the development of actually trying to attract more BAME talent into your company. I think you can always be genuine if people see the reality of what you're trying to do. And as long as you're open and explicit about that reality and sharing that with other organizations and other companies, when people on the surface want to find, okay, what organization do I need to get involved with, there will always be a level of recommendation there, because people know what you're trying to achieve and they know you're one of the ones that are actively trying to make change. So I think those are probably a few steps that I would suggest would be a good way forward in terms of partnering with those organizations and actually being open and explicit with the rest of the industry what you're trying to do.
Thank you, mate. Lisa, last question to you this week, and a couple of people have kind of given a shout out on your point about, you know, BLM being kept very separate from the whole of the kind of inclusivity chat, and, you know, quite rightly too, it's kind of the burning topic right now. How are some of the things that you're doing to keep that differentiation, and how can you keep kind of your foot on both pedals, if you like?
Yeah, well, I think it all starts with, I mean, this was a moment of reckoning for us to look at our culture and say, like, do we have a culture that is, you know, based on trust and openness and vulnerability, so that we can have effective conversations? And once we, you know, address that and kind of openly define that that was our culture, you can start to pare down, well, a lot of ambitions we have, and the ambitions came thick and fast from every different type of employee at Tribe and every creator involved and every client involved. And of course, you then have to prioritize. And I think, yeah, you can have these lofty 3 to 5 year goals of what your organization needs to transform into, and how that includes all different types of protected characteristics. But right now, we've got a short window of accountability and momentum specifically to address race. And I think that our resources, I think we can all agree, can move in that area, at least in the immediate term. So although there's a million problems in the world we all want to solve, you can't tackle them all at once. And with Black History Month, you know, on the horizon, I think there's a lot of things companies can do to maintain momentum around education and awareness, around action, and also accountability. So trying to start putting in some goals, trying to, if you don't have the data, you don't have the information, start finding out how you can measure things, and, you know, what kind of organization you want to look like, and keep funneling resources to addressing this first.
Cool. Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you so much to Shani, and thank you to Jenny, our guest today. You've been absolutely awesome. Shani, I know a lot of people asking to reach out to you and stuff, so I might follow up with you separately after that. Thank you again to the Me4 mentors, or I should get the language right, Me4 mentors. It's been brilliant again this week, guys. Thank you everybody else for joining. Again, we've had tons of registrations today, but it's still not the 500 plus people that signed that letter in the first place. So where are you? Join up. It's 45 minutes of your life and you can learn something and we can make things better. So help spread the word, and let's see if we can get a bit more momentum. But thank you those of you who have turned up. So as we said at the beginning, if you're listening and want to take action or would like support, please go to the Me4 website where you can get in touch with a mentor. You can ask for somebody to help you, and that's what we're there for. All of our webinars for the last few weeks are all on our fantastic shiny, it's not quite shiny yet, but it will be YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and have a look at some of our previous shows, they're absolutely all there. If anything we've touched on today has caused you to be triggered or concerns, please get in touch with NABS. They have a helpline, they have an email address. They're brilliant guys over there and they can help support you. And in the meantime, I just want to say one last thank you to everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, team.